Good morning, everyone. This is the continuation of the City of Boise's negotiations with the Boise Police Union. I will remind everyone to use the microphones when you're talking, please. And for a point of order, if we could just go around and introduce ourselves. My name is Courtney Washburn. I'm the Chief of Staff for the City of Boise.
I'm Biff Jones, Chief Administrative Officer for the Department of Finance Administration.
Kyle Wills, Boise Police Union.
Danny Carter, Boise Police Union.
AJ Veens, Boise Police Union.
Kristen Holtz, Benefits Administrator, HR.
Christine Smith, Compensation Analyst, HR.
Tammany Brooks, Deputy Chief, Boise Police Department.
Adam Collier, City's Outside Legal Counsel.
And with that, we were a bit unclear who was going to kick today off. I think we're happy to, or if you would prefer to, that's fine as well.
No, I think it'd be great if you guys start.
Sorry, it took me a little bit to get going. I just dropped into the folder for the city's proposals for today's date. The city's response to the union's counter proposal on the annual druthers. So we had recommended initially that we would change the annual druthers process to one time a year with 2 shift selections. The union rejected the proposal. And at this point, the city's going to withdraw the proposal completely. So we'll leave the language the way it is and agree to the union's position on that. Any concerns with that?
No, we don't have any questions.
Okay, I just dropped into the folder the city's response to union proposal G. So last week, the union brought forward a PowerPoint presentation talking about the disciplinary process, brought forward information regarding various best practices, and then brought forth a proposal regarding the disciplinary action. The city has made a couple of changes or recommended changes to that, one of which is the union had brought forward the proposal, the disciplinary action or corrective action, which results in 2 or more days off. I've actually made that stronger for the union's position and would agree to anything that's 1 day off. So anything with economic sanctions, it doesn't have to be 2 days off, but bringing it down to 1 day off, leave without pay, a demotion or firing. And then the continued language at the end with concern with the last sentence that the union proposed, where it talked about written notification within a reasonable amount of time, defining what reasonable is, and the concern that that could cause to both sides. Change the language to written notification prior to the investigatory interview, before any interview takes place of the subject officer.
I appreciate the department bolstering that up on our side. I appreciate that. I just have some questions regarding, so the way it's written, there would be no notification that the investigation is ongoing or conducting or being in that process, only a written investigation for your interview. Is that the intent? Because that's kind of how I'm reading it.
Well, the intent is just recognizing that each incident would be unique. Some notifications would occur sooner than others, depending upon the complexity of the investigation, who's conducting the investigation, what the allegation of misconduct is. And so to just make it a more definitive timeframe or something that we could understand and recognize that the burden was met, the proposal was that it would occur prior to the investigatory interview. That's not saying it would occur right before, but that there's just notice would be given to the officer prior to any investigatory interview of that officer is conducted.
So I think our concern here is that an investigation can be ongoing for a long period of time. And maybe the officer has heard this, maybe they haven't through the rumor mill. And now this is causing undue stress. So there's no requirement the way it's written. That's just for the interview, which traditionally speaking, that's happened within the last week of the interview. So they try to give you 4 or 5 days notification. And I understand that their workload is heavy and that you're working on that, and we appreciate that. But this just says before the interview. So the investigation can be open for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 45 days, 3 days, without even letting the members know that they're being investigated. And so I think our real intent, and the reason we used reasonable amount of time is because we wanted to give you latitude, and we understand the bureaucracy of putting that all together and stuff coming from the Office of Police Oversight and those kinds of things that can happen, phone backs and all those kinds of things. So I understand that the reasonableness is kind of a vague term. We really just kind of put it in there because we want to give you the latitude to make it workable. But our intent with that is that they are notified that an investigation has been initiated or launched. And so I think the way that it's written, that doesn't ensure that still. And so currently our policy requires that you be notified prior to interviewing. And as a matter of practicality, how would I show up for the interview if I wasn't notified? So I think that we still are looking at the department's position to try to come up with a reasonable solution to notify our guys that, hey, you are being investigated, much similar to the criminal justice system, with some assurances like, okay, this is what I'm being charged with. This is who's complaining against me. This is the allegations. And obviously, we're talking about non-criminal stuff. We respect the right for the department to conduct criminal investigations. We think that's outside of any of this, like we've previously mentioned. So this is just for policy and procedure and standardization. So I guess I just don't understand why the department is unwilling to notify its members that they're under investigation. And so if we could figure out a way to do that, I think that we could find that common ground. And so we're willing to let the time frame be whatever the department needs to be for the time frame. We just think it's a priority for us to be notified that you're under investigation.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the reasonable amount of time just opens it up. If you disagree, that if you think the city hasn't provided a reasonable amount of time, then here's another grievance that could be filed over whether you got reasonable notice or not. So we didn't want to have this vague term in there that would open up the door to additional grievances. So I think from our perspective, we do and are willing to provide reasonable notice, but we don't. I don't know that we want to write that in the contract and then have disputes over it.
And then I'd just like to add, so looking at it from my perspective, one, sometimes an investigation will occur and the investigation will disprove the allegation. So one of the concerns I have, and I've seen in the past as well, is if we were to notify an officer there's an investigation going on only to find out that the allegations were completely unfounded, now that officer has the concern that, oh my gosh, I'm being investigated for something if we're making a notification too far ahead. Secondly, I'll say that by and large, and I know you talked about, 6 months, 9 months, a year, that really does not happen hardly at all. And most investigations of alleged misconduct, the goal is to have them completed within the initial 30 days. So to talk about a 6 month or a 9 month notification or investigation into an officer being investigated, the allegations, especially for the smaller items, wouldn't ever go to that extent where the investigation would be delayed for that period of time. And so again, recognizing that our goal is to complete the investigation in as timely a manner as possible, and then coming up with something that is more definitive, that also as the paragraph outlines, we just wanted to make sure that there was something that was identifiable as ensuring that the burden was met.
So do you feel like because we understand that minor issues may be dealt with by the supervisor, they may document that there was a complaint, they may quickly turn them around and say, this is, there could be something of a demeanor complaint, right? And the sergeant gets a call from the party and the sergeant pulls a videotape, documents the complaint, finds it unfounded in a very short period of time. It does not go to internal affairs, does not get investigated on the internal affairs side. So do you feel like if we reconstructed this to include more significant investigations that are conducted by internal affairs, that we could come up with a time frame 7 days after initiation, 14 days after initiation, that would possibly satisfy our members who request this and meet your burden and your concepts.
Chief, if I can just stop you there, I think we need confirmation that this meeting's actually being live streamed. So if you could just hold on one sec. Apparently, we're streaming to ourselves and not to anyone else. All right, Chief, it looks like you can resume.
And Dana, to answer your question, I think my concern with what you just said is we're still getting into some vagueness if we're talking about what would be considered serious or what the allegations are. I think sometimes I've seen in the past where an investigation starts out with a relatively benign allegation only to find out later that there is a more serious allegation that stems from that. And so again, trying to come up with something more definitive. Obviously, I think it's easy to justify and explain that it would be any notification would come prior to an investigatory interview. But again, recognizing that our goal would be to complete that investigation in a timely manner and the notification would occur prior to the officer being interviewed.
So a couple things on that, Chief. Based on past history, there's oftentimes that this notification comes with an email, possibly on a weekend. A lot of times these are coming within less than a week's notice. And if it's on our days off, that gives me 3 days, 4 days to prepare for the interview, get hold of our attorney. And I know you spoke to that briefly, that the delays, but there's many times that our members, the internal affairs investigations are not even checking our schedules. They're emailing us when we're not at work, and not everybody checks their emails when they're off duty. So they come back to work, they get a notification, they're being interviewed in 2 or 3 days. Additionally, the concern I have also is if we do have somebody that has a behavior that needs to be corrected and it's taking 30 or 45 days, and it's something simple like, I did this policy violation, you notify me and I think about it and I say, oh yeah, I didn't realize that was a policy. This is coming down the pipe. I can immediately correct my behavior because I know, I look up the policy. I'm like, yes, this is what the policy is supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to do this. And I can correct my behavior immediately. If you don't notify me for 2 or 3 weeks or 28 days, then all that behavior is still occurring and it's kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. I would recommend that we could go to something like any internal affairs investigation that has an internal affairs investigation number that is being tracked and investigated per the process. We'd be notified within 10 days, business days, that the investigation is going on. Because even as you're saying, as we sit here and we work the streets and we can see that officer complaint came into our sergeant, but we don't know what that complaint is. We don't know if I need to check my behavior, if I need to prepare for something. You know, I was present, so I know the actual facts that occurred, no matter what was alleged and what maybe I was in violation, maybe I wasn't. But, you know, to additionally build trust with the organization based on past relationships, we feel it's super important to be notified that you're under investigation. And somehow we need to come to a resolve on this. And we are more than willing to extend those timeframes. However, the department needs to see fit. We just think that it's appropriate to tell people that they're under investigation prior to being interviewed.
No, and Denny, I'll agree with you, and I'll talk about, you know, you mentioned the example about, you know, a certain behavior or maybe something that occurred where you don't believe the member knew it was a policy violation. Most of that stuff's going to be, that investigation is going to be conducted by one of your own members, the sergeant in charge of that officer. And I know in several occasions when the officer talks to when the sergeant talks to the officer about it, they actually would rather get the interview over sooner rather than later. And so you had talked about sometimes, you know, being noticed 3 days ahead of time. I've seen examples where a sergeant said, hey, I need to talk to you about a particular issue. And the officer said, okay, let's do it right now. You know, I'd rather get this over with. And so I don't necessarily want to create an undue delay if an officer would rather take advantage of being able to speak about that incident right away. I hear what you're saying. I would just want to maybe come up with how we can determine a better way to find what a reasonable amount of time is. Because while I recognize
There.
okay, sorry. I'm with you. And I just, what I'd like to come up with is a reasonable amount of time. I think if we can all agree on what reasonable is in every situation would be ideal. But if we can't come to that resolution and it creates an issue for a potential grievance later on, that's, I think, what we're trying to avoid today so that we don't have to deal with it later.
Yeah, and I think that's in the best interest of everybody, right? I think that the simple process, and we're not really getting into the weeds on the process, but even a simple thing where a sergeant may be conducting investigation, and that may occur within the shift that I'm working, right? And we can do it quickly. A simple email where they say, you were complained against related to demeanor on this date from this person. That process should be pretty easy versus the formalized process. And it shouldn't cause any delays, shouldn't cause any undue stress. The undue stress comes from our members from the lack of trust. And so I think that, 10 working days, 14 days, yeah, if we need to give more, we can. And a simple process of notifying us, which can be electronic or written. I mean, even an email from your supervisor saying we're investigating you on this. I've already interviewed you on this. This is your notification. Would be an easy thing to resolve on the process side. And we'd leave that to the organization to figure out. It's just, it's a trust issue for us. And we feel like it is a national best practice. And we feel like that's something that we would like to do. So I think we can come up with a reasonable amount of time and maybe counter that or have a further discussion on the time. But I mean, if we need to go to 2 weeks, if we need to go to 15 business days, we can come up with something that meets the department's needs. We just have to meet our members' demands with a notification.
So just so I'm tracking, so the union is going to propose something in this space.
Yeah, we'll provide a counter proposal today. We'll type something up.
Thank you. And with that, I believe that's what the city had to offer this morning, right? No, there's another one. Okay.
One more. Okay, I just dropped in an edited version or an updated version of proposal 9 that the city brought forward previously, and that is regarding the civil service MOU. Previously, the union had rejected the city's initial proposal, which removed a vast majority of the language. What I have done in this case is actually gone through and taken the document and highlighted areas in either green, yellow, or red. The green areas, as you see on the legend at the top, are items that the city is proposing that could be incorporated into the CLA. The items highlighted in yellow would be what we would offer to enter into the department's policy manual, and items highlighted in red, we are recommending removal. If you look at the document, you'll also see that throughout the document, there are areas in which I have placed comments that either explain why we recommend removal, items that we believe should be in policy for certain reasons, and or items that are currently in the CLA already, which is the reason that we're recommending just striking the language altogether because it's already covered within the CLA. So it's a pretty comprehensive document, and I'd be more than happy to talk about any one of those items, assuming you want to take a look at it and go through it all and
Yeah, I think our best move forward is we will review this on a quick break or a break, I shouldn't say quick, on a break. And then we can come back and have some discussions and find that common ground. I just want to, the civil service rules are already an MOU to the contract. So I just want to make sure that we're both on the same page, that we consider them part of the contract. We had a hearing during a grievance where the hearing officer declared that they're part of the contract. And so we want to make it clear that our position is they are part of the contract currently. We are willing to incorporate some of them into policy and some of them into the CLA. So I think we can just find those common grounds and move forward. We'll just have to review them. So I think we have one counter proposal and then we have a discussion. So if we could give you guys that and then take a break to review this, we can maybe come back and figure out some of that common ground.
Sure. And I will defer to Adam. It is my understanding that the union and the city had previously discussed a number of these issues that are currently in this MOU and some, I don't want to say agreement, but there's been some dialogue regarding kind of how some of these decisions were previously arrived at.
Well, if it's the meeting that we were at with Adam, the discussion was, we want to move them to policies, and we said, we want to negotiate them in our contract. So it's pretty cut dry on that.
Before you move on to your counter proposal, can I just get clarification? You initially gave us a proposal A on prevailing rights. My understanding is your proposal G superseded your A. Is A withdrawn or is it still?
Yeah, we're going to withdraw A.
Okay.
And we can give you you rejected it. We'll give you a written withdrawal. And we revamped it and put it in the other section. I think it's more appropriate to be in that section, but.
Okay, thanks.
So I dropped in a counter proposal to 5 related to the time limits on sergeant vacancies. And you'll notice that we left the 90 days in there, but we're asking for some assurances related to not using those 90 days to make people non-eligible from a list that may have expired. So we're asking for that list of 90 days to slide if there is an eligibility list or somebody is waiting to be promoted, that the extension by the department isn't used for ill intent, and where they're just going to make the list expire and then make a new list to pick off people. So we've added that. I think we had a discussion about that already once prior to your counter proposal. But we've added this language to it, and we'll let you review it if you have questions.
So Denny, as I look at this, there's just a couple things that I'm thinking of. One, this proposal just changed from 30 to 90 days. The language that you've added doesn't exist in the current CLA. So I guess theoretically and I'm doing my best not to be offended by the, ill intent and, all these things. And I understand you've talked about previous administrations and all that. It wouldn't be something that we would do, but that language doesn't exist. And so whether it was 30 days or 90 days, I guess in that, that sinister world that you're talking about, the same thing could happen during that 30-day period that could happen in that 90-day period. If there was a reason that we wanted a list to expire, just, to prevent someone from being promoted, I guess could occur either way, but that would never be the intent. The other thing I would say is, based on what you wrote, this would basically allow someone to be on a list that expires, but yet still be on a list after that, which I think does a disservice to the other members who would be on the new list. One of the things that I'll talk about is in the modifications to the CLA, one of the recommendations that was made, I know you didn't have a chance to look at it, but the department's desire is to have an active eligibility list at all times. So the goal is that when a list is coming up to expire, we would have another process in place that would create a new list the minute that one expires. So there would be an active list ongoing. And with this language, you're basically saying that the new list that has been established based on, current time period, current job performance, current evaluation of an employee's performance on the job, that person would be slighted if there is what you perceive or what the union perceives, or as someone in the union, if they wanted to file a grievance, perceives as an intentional delay that is caused by a personality conflict or some other reason, I guess.
I appreciate that. And this is not to denote in any way any ill intention that you or Chief Lee have done to us. However, the 30 days has been used to prevent people from being promoted that previous administrations have had issues with. The 90 days, so we currently, the way it's been prior to Chief Lee and your arrival, is there has always been an eligibility list for supervisors. It's never a list that's expired. In the past, that's how it's been. We always have a test that's conducted prior to that list expiring. The 90 days, so I have concerns because we have a list, however the list is, however the test goes, you know who's on the list, and then we have a vacancy. Okay, so you already know before the vacancy who your people are, how their performance is, who the top person should be, and basically the ability to make your management decisions. So when you have to extend it 90 days, I don't understand why it would have to go to 90 days to make those decisions when for the last 6 months you knew that person A, B, and C are your top 3 candidates. And if we have a vacancy, one of them is going to need to fill that vacancy. So even though you don't intend to use it this way, you won't be here for 25 years, probably. Maybe you will, but you probably won't.
No.
But the members on this side of the table will. And so our concern is that not necessarily you, but somebody that follows you could use it in ill intention, and it kicks that door open more than 30 days. Yes, they could do that for the 30-day period. We prefer that they don't do it that way. And if we could figure out a way to make that happen, we would make that happen. But so there is concerns that that list does need to slide, because we do think 90 days is an excessive amount of time. But if that's what you say you need, then we're willing to give it to you. But we also don't want it to be used for ill intent once you're gone.
No, understood. And the 90 days was actually in response to the union's counter proposal, which said that you were amenable to extending that out. If there's a middle ground that can be met without having to add this additional language, I think the city's willing to look at that as well. I hear what you're saying, that additional language, I don't think it creates some issue in which there is a perception issue. And again, I don't want to bring it to a place where there could be an argument on intent, where one person feels that intent is one way versus what, the actual intent is by, the chief or whoever the chief is at that time.
I appreciate that. If you think that you're willing to shorten that time, then we can consider, and we will consider that at break when we caucus to remove some of that language. We can repropose a counter proposal and shorten that language. But really, our biggest concern is management already has the ability to choose. They already have the ability to know. They have the ability to bypass people that are on the list for cause. So if somebody's performance is not there, they don't have to go with the top 3 members in that list under the current rules. They can bypass them up to, multiple times before they have to tell them the reason why. But even after that, they have the right to bypass them and take them off the list. So there's a lot of management wiggle room in there, and we're okay with that. We just don't want it to be used for ill intent because it has been in the past. And we can shorten that and come up with some better language if that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'll just say the ability to keep someone on a list that expired isn't something that I think we're looking to be agreeable to in any way. And again, that's for the benefit of the members who are going to be on that new list.
All right. We understand. Thank you. I think prior to breaking, we'd like to talk about the grievance extension and try to make sure that we're on some common ground related to it. We previously proposed an extension to 45 days, which was rejected. And I think it warrants some conversation before we counter proposal the rejection. So really what we're asking for, there's really 2 ways we can go. And I think Adam alluded to this earlier, is what happens in Portland, which is on any discipline, we just file a grievance and then the city attorney can spin their wheels and maybe it'll go to grievance hearing, maybe it won't. And it seems like a waste of everybody's time. We do appreciate that we have a solid screening process. And just to put it in context, because I know that you're newer, we've had 2 hearings in 4 years on a grievance, and we've probably had 3 in 8 to 10 years. So it's not a process that we take lightly. We've filed grievances that we've negotiated with the organization and come to common terms on. But as far as hearings go, we've only had 3 in 8 to 10 years. So this is not a process that we utilize a ton. And I think that shows our discretion on the screening side, which Jamie asked some questions on. And so what our concern is part of that process is we have to send the internal affairs investigation the department does to city legal for redactions and approvals. Then we have to schedule the grievance committee the ability to come in and read that. And then we have to do a hearing after it. So we can try to come up with some timeframes and say, okay, if the city's willing to get it redacted in 48 hours or 72 hours, and they're willing to schedule it within 24 hours and shorten some of that process, that'll help for us to meet the 32 days. Otherwise, we're going to have to come back with some more time. And otherwise, we're going to end up in a situation like Portland, where we're just filing grievances. And then down the road, we'll figure out whether we're actually going to file hearings or not, or whether we're going to cancel them. It just seems like a waste of time, and we don't really want to waste the department's time or the city's time in that manner. So if there's some thoughts related to how we can condense that from the department and the city side to make that timeline or to give a little more extension, we're open to hear that prior to proposing something.
And so I'll just answer that with a question initially. So you said that it happened 3 times approximately in the past 8 years. Were you unable to meet that 32-day window during those 3 times? And because as I look at it, and I'm not as familiar with the process as you are, having been a union to go through and respond to this, initially, my initial thought was, perhaps it's just a change in the process from the union perspective to take away some of that discretionary time or that time, that has elapsed that could be condensed from a union side to ensure that it occurs within that 32-day window. Because I just wasn't familiar with kind of some of the challenges that you
Sure.
had faced. And so my thought process was A, is there a way the union could change the process a little bit? And then B, if there is something on the city side that has initially slowed you down, then yes, if you could bring that to my attention, and then we could look at what the city can do to reduce that time to help you guys meet your standard.
So we have had to ask for several extensions. And I think the extension, the intent of the extension, extending those out or even asking for more time is for us to do a quality screening process. Because we don't just say, oh, you have received discipline, we'll file a grievance. We say, let's review it. If you're in the wrong, we're not going to support it. If there's some kind of mistreatment due to the discipline or some kind of information that came out in the fact finding, then we'll go forward with it. And so the process is we ask our members, we'll continue to reiterate this, but somewhere between 7 and 10 days. I mean, it's a big decision to decide to fight getting discipline. So that's a unique perspective from the member side. So we ask them between 7 and 10 days to file the grievance with the union. And then we have to take that to the chief. The chief has to review it. He needs a day or so to review that probably, and then decide whether he's going to file that or fight that, where that goes. Then from there, we notify internal affairs, which then sends it to the city, and the redaction process can take some time because it's going down to city legal and, they have things to do. And then it comes back, and then I've got to get all of my 5 members back into internal affairs to review the file so that when we have a hearing with the member who feels aggrieved, that they know the facts, they can ask questions, and that takes a little bit of a process. And so we can either push that time just a little bit, and I think we can meet instead of asking for extensions, which I think is a bad practice. We can ask for we asked for 45 days. That was an extension of 13 days. We can possibly shorten that to a few more days, or we can leave it the way it is and go down the way of filing grievances. It's just not our intent to waste people's times and to do diligence related to screening, because I think it matters. It gives credibility to the organization that the union supports some of the discipline and some of the issues and says, no, we're not going to take this to grievance because you were in the wrong. And so I think it lends credibility to our intent to hold our members accountable, just like the department is, and to support the department in their disciplinary and corrective action decisions when we screen stuff out and say, no, we're not going to push this down the road. Versus, yeah, you don't like it, so we're filing a grievance. We don't want to get in that boat. I think that's bad business for the union. I think it undermines the department, and it really does not help the citizens either. So we'll come back with a written proposal on the counter side for that, but that's kind of where we're looking. We just want to be able to not have to go into the chief 4 or 5 times a year and ask for an extension on a grievance to then turn around a week later and say, yep, we're not going to grieve this because it was justified.
Okay, maybe that's where I'm getting confused, because initially you said 2 times within the past 4 years.
So the process is, here's the process. A member receives discipline. They file with the union whether they feel aggrieved or not. The union then takes the grievance to the chief. The chief reviews it and either, I'll let AJ will cover that. Go ahead.
Okay, let me try to clear things up a little bit, Chief. So member decides they want to file a grievance. Okay, however long they take, with 7 to 10 days, they decide they want to file a grievance. They bring that to Damon, Vice President. At that point, the member and Damon will go in and schedule the appointment with internal affairs. Damon has to notify the grievance committee as well. Okay, so once internal affairs been notified by Damon and the member, I think the member has to go in there and give the union permission to view the investigation. Okay, so once that permission is given, then that has to go to city legal, where an attorney has to screen everything, redact some things, and then that comes back to IA. Then IA has to set up a room where the 5 members of the grievance committee can come in and review that investigation. And that includes the written investigations, the videos, that kind of thing. So that all takes time. Then the grievance committee will meet. So we have to schedule, we're talking about scheduling cops who work various shifts on a specific day to meet with the member and their representative, which may be an attorney, may be the chief steward. But if it's an attorney, then you're running into schedule issues with attorneys. I'm not picking on attorneys. Jamie's not here, but we all know attorney schedules. So, and then that's the opportunity for the member to address the grievance committee on how they feel. You know, the grievance committee's already reviewed the internal affairs investigation, and then that's the members' time with the committee and their legal representative to kind of give their side to the union grievance committee. So after that meeting takes place, the grievance committee will decide immediately following that meeting with the member whether or not that is going to go forward. At that time, we either tell the member that it's not going forward, or we sign off on that grievance and then it immediately gets delivered to the chief. All those things have to happen in that 32-day window. That's the formal giving to the chief. After, if we've signed off on it as the grievance committee, then it goes to the chief. And then that next timeline, that 10 days, which I'm assuming you're looking at, that's when that 10 days kicks in with the chief.
Okay.
So we're looking at trying to get all that stuff done within 32 days. And when Denny was talking about 3 times, and that he was just talking, that's how many times we have gone to a formal hearing. Does that make sense? So
not how many times someone has brought something to the committee to consider
Correct.
moving forward. Okay.
Correct.
So with that said, just a couple questions, and unless Denny, you really need to go.
No, I'm good.
Okay. One, how often does it take that full 7 to 10 days for the member to bring that to you? Because that to me seems like a pretty large window. I mean, if I were to receive discipline, I think I would know relatively quickly whether or not I want to bring it to the union's attention, which that 7 to 10 days eats up, almost a quarter of that time that we're talking about right now. Is there a way to reduce that? And then my second question to you is, you mentioned filing an extension. Has there ever been a time, I guess, how many extensions have been requested, and has there ever been a time in which an extension was denied?
I don't believe have we ever had any denied, Damon? You don't have a mic.
One denied in my time. One denied in my time, and most of the time they're granted.
How long ago was that denial? Was that?
So it was under acting Chief Weiniger. Okay. The other ones, I think current Chief Lee's approved 2 extensions.
Okay.
It's not something that occurs every month for sure. It occurs maybe a couple times a year at best, but it's just, we have a deadline and it's not appropriate to just count on the extensions.
Nope, completely understand that,
And
which
so-
brings me back to my first question.
And I think we can condense some of that time and request our members, and we can squeeze some on the front side. But we also need to figure out the timeline on the back side too. So I think we can request that to stay smaller and ask our members to get that done quicker. And I think that will shorten some of the need for extension, but not all of it.
And then what I would offer as you look at that is, I could tell you right now, I would be agreeable to placing some sort of timeline on legal to prepare the documents for you guys. So in an effort to, again, expedite that, coming up with some period in which maybe legal has a certain period of time to prepare all those documents for you guys. And maybe even with language that if legal goes over that, then however many additional days that would be, if there were any, could be added on to the time in which you have to file that grievance. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that we should be able to come to some common ground on that. So I appreciate that.
Can I just ask two clarifying questions? I've been curious about this process and I just want to make sure I understand it. So the chief isn't involved in this until after the grievance committee meets and the recommendation is presented. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Yes, but there is instances where things are worked out. The contract's set up to work things out before it ever gets to that level. And many times we work things out before that.
Okay. And then one other quick question. If the grievance committee does not support the members' complaint or out of case or whatever it is, can they still move forward without the union support, or is that the end of the process?
So they have two options, the city process, which you're probably more familiar with than we are, but that one has to occur in a shorter time frame. The union contract is the 32-day one. So once we deny the grievance, their options are to go to the body and appeal to the entire body of the union, like at a meeting per se. And then that would also require them to open up their entire file for that to be voted on to the entire body. And then the second step to that is they can appeal to the national union as well. So they have two other steps that they can take.
And has anyone gone to a full meeting with their whole file?
In
To appeal?
my time, I know of one that did, and it didn't go past that.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I think if we take a caucus, what do you think? 45 minutes? Probably close to 45 minutes to go through that civil service. So we can come back and discuss that, and we'll create a couple of other short documents, the stuff we've talked about this morning, and see if we can't get those resolved. And we'll be back.
Welcome back, everybody. With that, I believe the union's going to go.
So we dropped in a rewrite of G, which I think we're getting closer to. The added language between the break or the caucus is blue underline. I'll let you take a look at it. And I think the last clause there, prior to investigation, needs to be stricken. That's covered in policy, but this version did not save it. I just updated it. So it would add 10 business days upon opening the investigation. And the notification could come in the email if we need to. If it's a supervisor type of investigation, it's going to be handled quickly.
Okay, Denny, I'll have to get back to you, check with our OIA and find out if that's even a viable solution for this. I think it still might be a little restrictive in certain areas that I just want to make sure I'm checking all my bases, and
Okay,
I don't want to commit to
And-
something that really
Understandable.
someone say, oh, well, did you
Sure.
think of this? And
sure. And the 10 business days is basically just trying to give it a 2-week window. If we need to push that a little bit, I don't think that's a problem for us. It's really just trying to give you guys enough time to make that happen. So I understand that you'll need to check with that division to make sure that'll work.
yes, please.
I dropped in the rewrite on the counter proposal to number 5, the sergeant's fill time. And basically, we took out the 90 days, pushed it to 45 days, and took out that existing language that was causing some trepidation.
I don't have any concerns with that.
Perhaps that's something we could TA today. I don't know. And then I think if we open the city's proposal on the civil service, that we can at least come to some verbal agreements on some of this. And we possibly could, we're going to need more time to get through all of it, obviously. But we can start down that road and knock off the things that we can get out. So as we looked at it, I think the first section of red, all the way up to and including section 2 would be amenable that we would allow that to be removed. And that would probably be acceptable to us. We agreed with section 3, the green. We think that should stick into the contract. And so that language is fairly agreeable to us. The lines of promotion, we're going to have to come back to you on number 2. I think the bottom green area is fine, but we want to have some deliberation on section 2. On section 3, we want to keep in the CLA A, B, and C, H, I, and J, and the other remaining portions we have no concern on where the department places those.
Can you just repeat those really quick?
Sorry, A, B, and C, H, I, and J.
And I'm sorry, you wanted those in the CLA?
We would like to see those in the CLA, and we can counter proposal, written counter proposal, but I want to kind of give you a ballpark of where our heads at related to that. So some of those specifically related to, like, for example, D, we understand that requiring an interview may not be the best process depending on the positions and what's determined. We think the department is the best place to make those decisions within those divisions. However, there's certain things in here like notification of an opening, posting of openings, those kinds of things. We do feel that they are appropriate to be in the contract. Number 4, following that, we are fine to allow it to go to policy. And number 5, we would like to see remain in some form at least in the CLA. Now with 4 and 5, we would request or we will propose that the definition under 4 of involuntary transfer makes its way into what the CLA definitions end up being on the wording, so that we're all on the same page related to what an involuntary transfer is, as well as the definition under 5 of involuntary transfer for cause. We would ask that, we put those into the definition sections also. We also are willing to let number 6 go to policy. And then we would want to review more time for the rest of these or counter propose some things. So without speaking out of turn, like you just mentioned, I think the things that are in green that are below that probably won't be a problem for us. We just want to make sure that the language, we don't need any language changes, but as a general rule, the things that are in green below that, we're amenable to. We just want to make sure there's no language changes that we want to update with that. And I think that's on the civil service rules. I think that's where we got to for today. I think. We did want to drop in the counter proposal on the grievance. Let me locate it real quick. So it's in the folder and no, that's not the correct one. Let me take that back. I think on the grievance one, we don't know where it went. We lost it. So we're gonna have to relocate it and redo it. But I'll just give you a ballpark on the visual or the verbal is we're looking at making 72 hours turnaround from city legal and a 24-hour requirement to schedule once it comes back. And then the rest, we'll just leave it at 32 days, adding the, if city legal needs more than 72 hours, that it just slides that 32-day by that delay. And so we'll repropose that counter proposal, but that's really where we're at. So 72 hours for legal to do their approvals and redactions. Once it returns to IA, 24 hours to make the schedule. And then if legal needs more than that, that the 32-day limit would slide with however long it took them to do the redaction. Oh, apparently I put it in the wrong location. So it's in 8.3. Let's move it over to 8.8. You want to move it over, Kyle? There it is. Okay. Guess I'm not going to get hired as an IT guy when I'm done. Copy, download it.
I was just trying, chief.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm just.
I think it may be in there. Yes, possibly in there. Check it now. So it keeps it at the 32 days. Makes the legal 48, IA 24. If legal's unable to meet that, then it'll slide in the 32.
So I'm reading this, it's getting a bit kind of muddled with different timeframes for everybody. I talked with legal, and I guess one of the challenges that we have, especially in today's technological era, a lot of what they're going through is also body cam footage. There's a pretty extensive review that they have, and I'm not sure that they can make that turnaround time. Might I propose maybe a compromise trying to reduce kind of a lot of that additional language, and maybe instead of getting into all that detail, changing your initial proposal from 32 to 45, and maybe we just add a week onto it and say 39 days, and then eliminate all of that extra confusion with different timelines and everything. So basically saying, we'll give you an additional week. My expectation from you guys is going to be, to try and work with the membership and have them not wait 7 to 10 days before they bring a potential issue to you guys. So I'm willing to bend a little bit on this, not quite go to the 45, but give the union an additional week, but just ask in return, you guys try and help us reduce that time frame by getting members to come to you sooner with potential grievances.
I think that's acceptable to us to push it to 39 days and not have to get all nuancy with exactly what you're saying. So 39 days would be agreeable, and we can just go back to the original language and change it to 39 days and be fine with that.
Sure.
So we can, I don't know if someone wants to take the responsibility for making that change and redoing the language, but we can print that as well as the proposal 5, the revised proposal 5, so that we can TA those today. We'll do it.
See that poor IT part just paid off for me.
I think in terms of the schedule, would you all like to caucus and continue your discussions about the civil service proposal, or did you want to break for the day and come back with that at our next scheduled meeting? It's really up to you all, or you may have more things we can get through today. I don't know.
I think if we caucused and continued today, we would make a little progress, but I think if we wait, we should be able to come back with pretty close to what we need out of it, or start from there. We'll have a better idea. So I think our recommendation would be we break after we do this couple of TAs, and then that way we have all our ducks in a row to come back, and that way we're not wasting any time, and we should be good.
Okay, and just to set the expectations for the next meeting, we would return with that subject, and then the city would go through our responses to your economic proposals. That sound good?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so I believe I've made the corrections on proposal F, and I've dropped that into the city proposal under today's date, if you want to take a look at that.
I think that covers it.
Is there any way to show it and track changes so that we can tell what changed from the previous, the current contract?
Take me a little bit of time.
Sorry. Just know when the contract's being put together, it helps to show the changes.
All right, I think I made all the changes in there if you want to take a look. And just so you're clear on what changes I made, I changed it from the union proposal to the city's proposal, today's date, and then went back and did the track changes, changing the language in the current CLA from 32 to 39 days in the 3 areas that the union had brought forward.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just for anybody who's watching the live stream, we are engaged in small talk while we wait for the printed agreements to return to the meeting. And then after those are signed, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so we will get these uploaded onto the shared folder so that we both have them.
I think that's it for the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.